All right, let's go ahead and get started just so we don't waste any more additional time. Guys, my name is Satyam Verma. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today. We're joined by some great experts who will provide us some insight on, and that kind of builds on the topics that we've been talking about. If you guys have been part of our past couple breakouts, we started with the understanding of what are the core components of putting together a technology stack for your own company. What does that look like? The next step we took from there is when you have a technology stack, how do you really ensure that within your own organization, data gets to the places that it needs to go? How do you structure that? How do you ensure adoption is what it needs to be, training, implementation? And what are all the things that you need to consider? Today, we're really going to talk about something that is really important and I think critical to understanding how data can be more efficiently transferred, communicated, built upon when you're talking across multiple organizations, but also still stepping into within your own organization, because a lot of people still use platforms that aren't built to naturally exchange information with others. And so this month's technology stack roundtable, we're going to dig into the mechanics of exchanging data from one system of record to another. Instead of a basic flat integration or what people think was a file import and export, what if we had integration platform as a service, or what we call iPaaS, that we're going to break into a little bit more. And today we're joined by Tammy Alexander and Chris Collins from Ryvit, who are going to really help us understand what are the capabilities of third-party connectors. And we're lucky enough to be joined by Sarah from Wanzek Construction as well, who's really going to be able to bring us firsthand experience and share some implementation strategies, as well as lesson learned through her experience trying to build strong data systems, let's say. And so with that, we want to step into really just understanding who's part of this discussion today. And so we have a list of some of the people that officially signed up. There might have been a couple people that slipped in after we officially exported this. But if we had a connector and this was all automated, we probably could have had it update on, but we don't.
That's right.
So, please feel free, guys. We really want this to be a discussion. We will lead it with a couple of questions, but we encourage everyone to participate. That's really what drives value for everybody at the table today. And we'll go through a high level just breakdown of what some of those questions are, really understanding what is an iPaaS connector, how does that differ from file export import versus a true connector, what are API-based connectors and what's the difference? How do we actually implement and affect change by using these processes, and what is actually required? And I'm going to stop sharing now just so we can focus on having a conversation. Please feel free to put any questions in the chat box, or we're not muting everybody, so please feel free to speak up as well. And with that, we're going to start with our first question today, which is, Tammy, if you would just help everyone get that base level understanding of what iPaaS means and what is a connector, so that we can all kind of start at a place together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Satyam. So an iPaaS really, it stands for, it's simple, right? In the world of integration platforms like Ryvit it essentially stands for an integrated platform. So it's a SaaS-based integration platform that is intended to standardize how applications communicate with other applications. There's, you can think of, I know I'm going to name something that you're familiar with: Zapier, MuleSoft, Jitterbit. Ryvit is a type of integration platform. We are a SaaS-based integration platform. We're a little different than the other ones I mentioned because we are very specific to the construction industry. We have very specific partnerships that lead to the development of the integrations that we power. The benefits of integrated solutions are real. Having the ability to move data in an automated live fashion is powerful in our industry. But it's not without its complications, right? APIs have different languages, they have different structures. There are solutions today that simply don't have APIs or API connectivity. But the power of a really integrated solution is there, it's real, and these integration platforms are built specifically for that, to standardize the connectivity between those systems.
Awesome. And so I think everyone probably understands the concept of Zapier, and what we're talking about today is specifically how do we take some of those successful instances that we've seen, like the ecosystem that Zapier has built, but make that specific to the workflows and problems that we face in construction. Because they are
Mhm.
unique and they can't just be addressed by, one size fits all type of solutions. Whereas, with some, you just go plug in two endpoints. It's not always that simple. And that's the importance of the conversations that we're going to be having today. And
Yeah.
so as we dive into that, I think, and the conversations I've had with a lot of clients is they feel sometimes that a import export solution is efficient or effective enough to get that strong level of data, uh, you know, transferability, whatever you want to call it. There's multiple ways to say it. But let's
Mhm.
dive into a little bit of the difference between a static import and export type of functionality versus a true API-based connector. And once again, I think, Tammy, you're the expert here, but I want to once again just encourage everyone to put in their 2 cents if they have any strong feelings, thoughts, or experiences. But why don't you guys?
Yeah, you guys jump in, and especially Sarah, you're here from a customer perspective. I see Julie joined us. Hi, Julie. Thanks for joining. Same customer perspective that we're looking for today, that offering of what is the power behind, an import-export file. In today's world, data is power. Data is what we all are looking for. The faster we can get data into our ERP solutions or to those other products, the other applications that we're using, the more benefit we get when it relates to job cost detail, to manpower, to timekeeping. So a static import-export in the past has been fine, right? I'm going to use the word fine. Everything's fine. We're all fine today, right? Has been fine. An API takes that into the world of live data, where you can literally move data between two systems within 10, 15 minutes, right? So I think that, just to kick it off, Sarah, Julie, you guys jump in here from a integrated company. But that's kind of what I'm seeing in our world today, the benefits transition from those, static import to the APIs.
Yep, no, you're 100% right, Tammy. That's kind of where we were coming from too, right? And import, export, it works. It's fine, to use your word, and that's sufficient. However, we all understand that then you're relying on a person, a group of people, to click those buttons and run that function, and the more that you can automate and take that out of people's hands, because that's a task that we can easily have a system, something else do for us. And now we can focus on the more important tasks, or the things that, we actually need to be doing. I shouldn't say more important, but the other things that are important for us to do our jobs too, and it just, like I said, it just kind of makes it a whole lot easier, makes it more efficient. And then, to your point too about data, it's like everybody wants something right now, right? Mm-hmm. And some of our jobs, we need to make decisions on the fly right now. And having that data at your fingertips in real time is so crucial to make those decisions. If you have to wait till you import a file, export, look at the Excel, manipulate, whatever that is, you may have missed the boat, and it could have cost you in one way or another. So, it's we recognize that too, and we're a company that's on the grow. We've got large projects. We've got a lot of things going on. So that was our biggest, one of our big needs, is being able to, like I said, just kind of automate that to set it and forget it, so to speak, and just know that your data is going to be there for you when you need it.
So, yeah, and thank you for that, Sarah. I guess to add to that, in some cases, the import export isn't even an option. If you're looking at like Concur, or you're looking at timekeeping, and you're adding Vista is the ERP that we use, and so if you're adding jobs and employees and phase codes into your financial system, and you're using a Concur or a third-party app, it's not even realistic to look at an import export. So those tools weren't even really available to us until we had a connector or an integration that we could automate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something important to think about that is, we think about the driving efficiency and what's gained there, but things change so rapidly, multiple times a day. A single document, you might have the right thing or what you think is the right thing right now at 9 a.m. You go through the process of import, export. You got a call at 9:15. Guess what? Everything's changed now. Everything's being updated. You can go through that process again, but that happens so often that, you know, what we've seen times a lot of companies do is, you know, say, okay, import, export once a day, once a week. You know, that's kind of the standards that get set. But a lot of the changes that happen in between can turn out to be fatal for, you know, mistakes that are being caused just by the fact that we don't have that real-time information. And that's an aspect that I think sometimes gets overlooked in the kind of sense of, okay, well, if we at least have it at the end of the day, but in the industry that we're in, I've seen it firsthand where, you know, you'll have 5 different phone calls in a day, and point A, where you started at, and you're ending up at point Z. And these are 2 different things. And without real-time some, you're just really increasing the amount of risk that you're actually exposed to based on, you know, a very simple aspect like that. Now, a lot of people, though, still feel like getting to just the word API, right? That already starts to get into the, oh, I'm not a tech-based person, and I am definitely not a tech-based person, and that was daunting to me at first. And I think you know, what we want to dive into next are what are some of the things that we're seeing today that maybe need to be changed or addressed so that we can reach this ideal state of data consistency across platforms. First is just, you know, that education and understanding, but you know, as Tammy and Chris, you guys work with these organizations. What are some, you know, maybe a top 3, 5 hit list of these are things organizations internally, externally can kind of think about to begin moving towards that new reality that we all want to get to?
Yeah, Chris, why don't you jump in here, and then I'll kind of add. I got a thought in my head, but I like to hear what you have to say from the API perspective.
Yeah, first thing that comes to mind as you asked that question was, you know, I always like to hear from customers what they think their integration is, and if they're talking to me about processes around their integration to manage their integration, whether it's an API or not, that's not a good integration. Integration should enable the processes you have, not add new processes to manage the integration. Sometimes APIs can open the doors for that, but when you break it down, the API is just an interface to share data and accept data from a system. It doesn't have business logic, right? It's not going to implement what a person is doing between those 2 systems. It's not going to be able to automate that. It just opens the door. They're critical. It's a critical component to having, you know, real-time type of interactions. But you still have to have that piece in the middle. You still have to have that iPaaS platform that's managing that data flow and making those decisions. And then managing the exceptions. There's always going to be exceptions.
I'll raise my hand. I'm guilty of what you're saying, Chris. Like at Pype, you know, oh, we have APIs, right? That should answer your
right. That's the start of the conversation, not the end. And
I was going to say, Chris and I hear that. Yeah. Chris and I hear that all day long. Oh yeah, we have APIs. Our customers hear that all day long. Yeah, we have APIs. What do we do with those?
Exactly.
You know, I'll add and just say that in today's world and in the industry that we live in, construction applications are popping up all the time. I mean, I literally think there's a construction startup, you know, that reaches out to Ryvit or to a customer and wants to talk to Ryvit about integrating all day long. Customers should be able to choose. In our world that we live in today, customers should be able to choose the solution that best fits their environment. So what Chris was referring to about business process is extremely important. When we have a company that comes to us and it says, we want to implement Concur and we want Ryvit to build the integration to XYZ ERP, we are here to support that because we understand that we can help them automate a business process, eliminate an issue that's going to continue to grow if they continue to rely on, and I'm going to say it, a butt in the seat. Because we know that we can, you know, we're fighting for manpower all the time. We're penny pinching on margins. We know our industry, right? We know every bit of our industry, and we know how important it is to implement a solution that's going to eliminate a problem, right? To improve a process or to build on a process. And the API is just a tool that gets us there. API is just a tool that makes the data flow easier. When a company chooses or decides on an application, it shouldn't be because it's connected or interconnected to another system. It should be best of breed and work for their business environment, for their business processes. It should enable improvement in that process. I get on my high horse. I spent 7 years Skanska funneling paper all day long as a job site accountant, and it can get exhausting. And that's the goal, is to eliminate that business process that took you away from doing something that was more beneficial to your company and more powerful to your company. So just to come back to it, an API really is just the tool that's going to help that process become, eliminate a lot of that manual paper, a lot of that manual pushing, and just facilitate the increased need that we need to data now, and eliminate those data silos that are being established when you do choose a best of breed that may not, integrate directly with your systems.
Okay. And we're going to kind of mix this up with kind of understanding adoption, right? A lot of organizations don't necessarily have the resources, or maybe sometimes not, right? The software is being rolled out by an IT team or an operations team. Maybe they're more support, maybe they're more construction based, or not necessarily tech. How do you guys kind of help and work with clients, or just help people understand that you don't necessarily need to have that level of technical resources? There are connectors and things out there. I mean, what's the first step in that conversation? Because that's where we see a lot of people, once they get into the conversation, it's like eyes wide open. They're like, wow, this is awesome. But they've had a lot of trouble seeing how to get there because they just feel they don't have the resources. Hey, we already paid for all these systems. And what is that first step that people need to take? I know, we kind of laid out how you get there, but how about the mindset?
Yeah, Sarah and Julie and customers, you guys jump in and tell me what you think it is. Tell Chris and I and Satyam what you think it is. And then, maybe we can
add
to
invest in connectors, because not everybody is.
Yeah. Hi, this is Dennis. I'm with Sage, and I work very closely with all of the Sage construction real estate integration partners, et cetera. And a couple of things that I think of when I'm thinking integration is, first, am I talking between a cloud system and a cloud system where those APIs are cleanly available to talk to each other? And in many cases, if it is cloud to cloud, it makes things a lot easier. If it's not cloud to cloud, then you just got to make sure you're taking into consideration, well, how do I connect to that API? How do I connect to the other cloud piece? Because that adds just another level of complexity into it. And there's no doubt that the tools like the platform systems that Ryvit has helps that out a little bit, because they kind of get it half connected already with their connector. But I think there's when you're looking at these integrations, you do have to take it into consideration. Are they both cloud solutions? Are they not both cloud solutions, et cetera? Then you get into that whole line of, are there APIs on both ends or not? And then eventually you get into, how clearly does the data map? And do I have to? Does the job fit directly into the job? One of the things I think is critical is you really want to, in a lot of integrations, you want to make sure that the data that you're getting ready to push into a system, that it's kind of like already pre-validated. And so if someone's writing a little custom app or something like that, and let's say it's a time capture app that someone's building out for you. Well, you're going to capture a job and you're going to capture a cost code. Well, try to validate that job and cost code before you send it through. Because if it's like imports, imports, if it pushes something through and it rejects it, puts it into a reject file, and then you got to deal with it. Well, a little bit of the same thing deals with the APIs. You're still going to have to deal with it. So try to make sure that you have kind of clean data before you're ready to push. And then, the person who's writing the integration for you, ask them what happens if the data's not clean. So if I push a job and the job isn't there, is it going to come back and tell me that? Is it going to put it in a condition log to say, hey, I couldn't push through this, single time entry because that job wasn't there? So, I always tell people, well, think about if you're sitting down in front of that program that you're integrating to and you're doing it manually. that's what we ask the integrations to help us do. So you still got to be really cognizant of the type of data you're passing. But there's no doubt, I agree with Tammy, they can save lots of time. They could reduce errors because you're not rekeying data. And there's so many advantages. I agree 100%.
I love
Can
that
I add
statement,
something
Ben.
from a customer's perspective?
Sure.
Yeah, this is Jeff Peterson with P1. You know, we've been dealing with APIs a lot lately, and one thing I really want to encourage, or that has really been a challenge, is it seems to us that when it comes to like the API integrations, that the level of testing that is done by the software providers is not the same as if it's their own application. And what ends up happening is that we as customers end up being the test bed for these applications. And so what ends up happening is if I'm saving, you know, some hours or whatever by transferring this data and utilizing this API rather than import, export, or even some other means, that we end up hitting a roadblock because the application hasn't been tested and the integration hasn't been tested with enough data and enough thoroughness. And then my guys out in the field, I might have 60 guys, and that API goes down and they're relying on it. I got 60 guys now sitting around for whatever, you know, and all that time lost because that application wasn't tested. Because it just seems like the same responsibility for the testing doesn't really taken on by the software provider. So that would be something that if we are going to push APIs into the industry, that we really need to have a standardized, you know, something that really test and vet these APIs to make sure that they're reliable before they hit your customers. Or I also kind of get a rub because I feel like we end up taking on a lot of the cost for the software providers for their testing. And I personally don't think that's completely fair. You know, I mean, I think that testing cost should fall upon the software providers to provide that cost for all that testing or whatever. So I just want to add that on because I think the APIs is amazing, but it just seems like in the last year, the more I encounter these, that's the problem we keep encountering, is that just it's not reliable and hasn't been tested thoroughly enough.
Coming from the software side, Jeff.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Tammy, please.
No, I was going to throw Julie and Sarah under the bus here and say, how many betas have we been through together? I think I've lost count at this point. From a Ryvit perspective, Jeff, we actually, when we build an integration, we build these pre-built connectors that we offer to the ERPs that we support. And Chris can dive into the technology side. He is well versed in that. I stay high level and don't want to get into the weeds, but we spend hours with our betas on the integration we're building right now with the Wanzek team. We have been working on this since I think February, Sarah and Julie. I think the current one, that's the current one. We spent hours validating the API, the data flow. To Dennis's point, the error exception handling, we call it in our world, how to handle those errors, who's responsible, what happens, what kicks back, who gets the information, how do we support it, and we are partnered. We sit in the middle of different partnerships, right? We have partnerships on each side in our platform. So we essentially have the great benefit of being able to support them all, which puts us in an awkward spot sometimes. But Sarah and Julie, I mean, validation wise, build wise, integration, vetting wise, love to hear your guys' thoughts and how that happens in our world today.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you've got a well-tested pre-built connector, you know, it works every time, but you're limited in what you can actually connect or sync up. I'm kind of thinking of the Procore Vista connector, where it is what it is. But some of the custom connectors, which we have spent a lot of time testing with Ryvit, Concur, Innate, we've been able to work with them and partner with them to customize it in a way where it's more valuable to us. So I guess that's kind of the trade-off, is that you spend more time testing and working together, but at the end of the day, you hopefully get something more valuable to the organization.
Yeah, what I see a lot in the types of errors that do show up in the field, many times it comes down to configurations. And you know, when we're integrating two pieces of software, especially back to an ERP that has a lot of configurability, where I typically see problems is if the integration software, whoever's building that, did not consider all the scenarios. And, I'm just looking at, I've seen some ERP job cost systems where you have certain types of cost codes, or you don't use categories or cost types, and all these variations of the way you configure the software. But unfortunately, 1 out of 10 companies use it. So that particular use case doesn't get tested. So, to the consumer, I do feel for you, because it is challenging, especially if you depend on it and it doesn't work. Is, if you think of your implementation and anything that you think might be different, bring it up in the conversation. Say, we don't use categories in our software. Does your software work without categories? I'm working on a variety of integrations with ADP right now. And, in the construction industry, we all have, regular overtime, labor, material, equipment, all these different types of cost types. Payroll and ADP doesn't have a clue what that is. So if you're trying to integrate with ADP, they're probably not going to know how to do it. So industry integrations are important too. Is if you're looking at a horizontal solution that is not industry specific, there's going to be misses there. There's going to be even more misses there. So you've got to bring up your uniqueness in the conversation and research.
This is Benny from MSuite. One other thing, and sort of Jeff, back to your point, and I think there's two sides of this. Sometimes providers are going out, and is there usable examples that they have in the market? Like, is there something that's built today? And if so, that's where the edge cases that Dennis is talking about all the time, or that can come up, right? The idea that, we had a special implementation without categories and things like that. But I think as providers, our teams need to do better. And as consumers, we need to ask the question too about the API. What is in there and who is using it? Because an API, as Chris said earlier, is nothing more than something to translate and send or push information. It doesn't solve, the API doesn't solve it. And I think too often people from the provider side or from the other side are just implying that, okay, yeah, there is an API and therefore it can just magically work. And so I think the questions, right, as a consumer, asking those questions of, use cases, who's done it, can we talk to them and see that? And then from there, really just because it worked for Bob down the street, integrating the two softwares, that's where sort of Dennis comes in with his point that even though it worked for Bob, think about your internal tech stack. If we're talking about tech stacks and how they sort of integrate together, are there different things that you do? Well, we've done it this way. We know it's not really the normal way the software works. Think about those things, because that typically causes more confusion and things sort of as you go down further. And to the thing of someone's API going down, that's still inexcusable, right? Or there will be things that happen. That's, between I think you and the provider. But just on another thing in generality, when looking at this, it's the APIs obviously don't solve the business problems. It's what are the business problems we're trying to solve that these can help us facilitate? And what I'm seeing the innovative groups do today from the consumer side, from mechanical, mostly I've worked much more closer with mechanical and electrical, but I'm sure it's the same, where people are spending their money in-house to help better hook up their own systems via APIs if they have in-house dev teams, or work alongside companies like Ryvit to help augment their in-house, or if they don't have in-house dev, this idea of sort of a integration as a service.
Yeah. And I think that brings the point home in terms of what we're talking about, is really highlighting the difference between iPaaS and actually an integration platform as a service that has went out, did the grunt work, did the hours of testing, validated the use cases, and can provide a very clear understanding of how to accomplish that business process that you are looking to make better, versus doing it yourself in-house, leveraging your software provider to do it for you. But what I will also just add on to the end of that, if you are serving as a test bunny for your provider, you should be very clear and upfront with your providers about that. That is not, as you mentioned, Jeff, you are taking on costs of developing research, development, testing, validation. And then I'm saying this coming from the software side, because at Pype and now at Autodesk, we actually put in a lot of time and effort to do that, but that's not necessarily always the case. Earlier stage, later stage companies, but if you're put in that position, you should be using that as leverage in your discussions with your provider. I don't think that's something they should be putting on you as a client of theirs to take on that risk and that cost as well. Building off of that, right? We've talked a lot about how using connectors can have an impact on your organization internally, but a lot of the issues we see as well is just the lack of interoperability between your partner systems, right? I at a GC use this platform, my design firm is using another platform, my subcontractors are using a third one. Connectors can also be used to build that more unified ecosystem. And that also comes into kind of how this is being driven in terms of accomplishing these goals as well. And so, I know we haven't necessarily talked about this before, Tammy, in our group, but is there a difference in approach in what can be accomplished when you're looking at internal connections versus how you integrate with your external partners?
Yeah, definitely. Ryvit powers CDX integrations, what we term as construction data exchange integrations, where external to a Wanzek is a one organization that has multiple applications that want to connect to one system within that organization. A CDX integration is essentially an integration that is powered between two organizations. So you want to have an engineering platform that the engineer stays and answers RFIs and submittals in X application, but it needs to get to the project management solution where they have the answer to the RFI or the answer to the submittal. And the data needs to be bidirectional, right? That is integration between two different organizations. It's Wanzek and Ryvit, or it's Wanzek and their engineering firm. They are very different profiles, and I'm going to let Chris jump in here on this because he's built one. They're very different profiles. They require a massive amount of coordination between the two applications and Ryvit being in the middle, because they are very different. You are looking at external systems connected to two different owners, right? Essentially two different owners. So Chris, you want to jump in there and share?
Yeah, I could fill in some thoughts there. This actually ties back into our previous conversation a bit. For CDX, connecting two different organization systems, it's even more important. But this is important within your organization too. Is you have to look beyond just data mapping. You have to understand the functional transition points, responsibility between the systems and the people. And if you truly understand that, then building your own integration within a single org, or sharing data between organizations for multiple orgs becomes much clearer, and you will find success and very powerful success. But if those lines are muddied and it's not clear when one person is, in charge or responsible for an answer and another person is supposed to be managing that document, you're going to have a lot of confusion and therefore
there's no application or API that can fix that.
Right. But yeah, whether it's one org or multiple orgs, if that purchase order is going through your one organization, but it's going between a couple of departments at corporate and PMs in the field, if it's not clear where it's transitioning between those, it's going to be difficult to integrate between a PM solution and a back office solution. And that same thing is true for a construction data exchange between multiple companies. You have to have very clear lines of delineation on who's responsible for what document or process at that point in time.
But these are things that can really revolutionize the relationship you have with your partners and take it to the next level in terms of efficiency gained, money saved, honestly, because there's so many errors that are caused simply because the lack of transfer of information or the time it takes, the inaccuracies. And so the driving core is, we've seen, clients who they have one partner. They've always worked with the same design team and then the 5 same subcontractors in the same region year after year after year. Those are scenarios in which having these, org to org type of integrations can really differentiate the way you're able to perform work compared to the organization competing against you.
I always related. Sorry, Dennis, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I always relate it, and this is gonna sound silly, but to how many times you touch groceries. When you go to the grocery store, how many times you touch them? You put them in your cart, you put them on the belt, you put them in your car, then you have to come home and you have to unload them. You know, an RFI submittal process is exactly the same. How many people touch that process before you get an answer? How long are you waiting when that person clicks the email and then forgets to respond for a week? Or 30 days later, you return to that email and you're like, oh crap, I completely forgot to respond to this, and now they need an answer right away. And how many touches are we making when you can streamline the process and that RFI goes from the person that's responsible for writing it to the person who's responsible for answering it? It sits in their queue. Then it sends them a reminder, hey, you haven't answered me yet. You haven't answered me yet. You know, follows that process. 2 days later, you get a response and you get an answer. How much time have you just saved on your job? How much faster can you get that building built? How much more streamlined was it? How much more empowered do your employees feel? So I think there's a true power not only in, you know, just automating the data, but in our real day-to-day lives of the building process. We are improving our employees' mobile accessibility by bringing on these best-of-breed applications, and then by integrating them, we're improving the speed at which they can do their work. We don't need somebody. In my day, I used to have a superintendent on a job site who would hand me a shoebox full of receipts, right? And that drove me insane. Like, I don't need your shoebox of receipts. Why isn't this better? Now you can take a picture of that receipt and get it to the person who needs to approve it in a matter of minutes if you needed to, right? So automation is a beautiful thing, but the business process behind it is important as well.
Yeah, I would like to say something here from the design side. Well, the first thing I want to do is agree upon the fact that our office, for instance, has a lot of continuing partnerships with general contractors. So we find the same partners again and again and again. So Tammy, to your point, the whole system of RFI does not necessarily happen at the construction phase. If it's a design build partnership, it can happen way ahead, even in like the schematic design set. So having that ability to integrate and plug in the design team, when I say design, it's architecture, engineers, structural engineers, what have you, to be able to plug them into the system, train them, so that that continuing partnership will allow the salvaging of that time, and there is no learning curve available or required for that matter, would be the best case scenario. I think that's one of the things we clearly lack in terms of expertise, because many a times there's a new system we have to learn every time. And I see my project managers tearing their hair out, and my specialty is technology, right? So I'm trying to enable them with whatever I can. So people like me need to be in that conversation from a particular partnership before the partnership actually begins. So we know that the connectors that you're enabling us with will have a certain learning curve, the feasibility of it, and how we extract the data from what we are designing and scheduling.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, one of the biggest advantages of kind of the CDX that we built, one of the CDXs we built at Ryvit, is the fact that you get to live in your own product, like your own application, right? You know your application, you know how to go in there, you know, you're not going into someone else's applications because you're doing this job together for the next 2 years and you have to enter in data into 2. You know your environment. Let's keep you in your environment, just like we want to keep, you know, PMs in the project management solution. Let's keep them there instead of having to go into the ERP where I don't want them. You know, we don't want you in the ERP. We want you in the project management solution. So that's a great point.
The other
whenever I meet with, I'm sorry, Nathan, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, you brought up a good point I want to go back to, of the way you do an RFI in construction is very different than the way you do it in design.
In design,
different ways that, and what is that barrier? What is that boundary of realization between the phase 2 design of how you do an RFI that's in BIM versus how you do an RFI once you've already started fabricating something, because the game totally changes, right? It's all about protecting your asset, measuring whatever, versus beforehand, it's all about openness, transparency. How do we just make sure that the ultimate design responsibility says yes, but get it to that person as quickly as possible. Don't go through this whole hierarchy that you don't need to in the design phase, but you still might need to in construction. And knowing the difference is that complication that helps us better understand the complexity of the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
I call
think,
it the great data canyon, and it's like Wile E. Coyote running across, and suddenly there's this depth. That's where we always have that problem. There's a disconnect between the different processes, and the timeline's not linear anymore. It's not a line anymore. It completely depends on the kind of project delivery system you're utilizing.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that is definitely facing the industry. I know there's been discussions for years on trying to come up with the best way to solve it, and it's still underway. I know it's not, the industry's not giving up on it. Is that the system that you need? Someone made the comment earlier about, God, it would be just great if I could always work in my own system. So as an architect, I'm always working in my own system, but I need to communicate with 4 different GC systems, and one could be Procore, one could be, a Trimble product, one could be New Forma. Who knows what it is? Okay, and what we've got to work towards is that we've got to move it down a notch. We've got to move from, company talking to company to project talking to project, because I could have 4 projects, and each of those 4 projects could be all talking to Procore. Or I could have 4 projects, and one could be talking to Procore, and one could be talking to New Forma, and one could be talking to who knows what. And so, I think that we've got to eventually be bringing in, and I know that there's discussions about different ways to accomplish it, but we've got to align at the project level, and that's something I believe, from an industry, again,
I'm going to be super fast. I'm going to be super fast. Dennis, I agree with everything. I'm going to pick apart one thing though. So you said project to project versus company to company, and I agree. We don't want company to company, but it's not necessarily project to project. It's actually company to project to company, right? That you establish a project in the center, and that both companies plug into that. And like, is an iPaaS that central? Like, could you almost set up the idea of an iPaaS around what the project is, and then you can be in your companies and come into it. But again, I'll shut up.
Different ways to solve it. Yeah, there's no doubt that's one way.
We need options, right? And that's the whole idea of an iPaaS, is that it should be the canvas to let us choose the way we want to do it from a framework of choices. And it starts with one MVP, and then another use case, and then ultimately we'll have that dictionary, that library. But like, we're still stuck on what is that first use case. We've got a ton of capabilities out there, but I can't find the real world, real project use cases where people are actually sharing RFI or submittal data, between companies, and we want to document that stuff. But it seems like whenever the rubber seems to meet the road, it's either missing a little data field here, or it's the workflow isn't quite right there. And I think that's just that patience that we're all going to have to go through. And I'm sure a lot of what Tammy and Sarah have been going through, of the kind of the pains of getting this stuff to work and getting it off the ground. That, I think we have inflated expectations as industry, and I think a lot of software is like used to it, and you're like, come on guys, like, this is what Agile is all about, is you go slow before you go fast. But we're not ready to go slow and figure that stuff out together. All right, off my soapbox.
Now,
we got 10-minute warning. 10-minute warning.
I wanted to make sure that one concept I did in thought process I wanted to make sure we got to is, we talked a lot about, the whys and what value it's going to provide and what we need to think about. But, in order to see this in action, right, there really has to be somewhere where this starts, right? Where do we begin to gain adoption? Is that something where, you can prove out the best use case and it's going to be the most adaptable when you start just on a project level and find out what those workflows and connectors and business processes you want to solve are? Or do you start at the company level and say, hey, we're going to figure this all out? Is there, I'm sure both ways are valid. Tammy, Chris, you guys have went through it. Sarah, you probably had to go through this decision process. Pros, cons, do you prefer one over the other? I mean, what approach should people be taking?
Well, I'd love Sarah and Julie to jump in here, because they, like I said, they've been through some betas with us, and I think now we've probably perfected the beta phase, with you guys. But give us some input on how you think the best way is. I mean, what is that process? What's it look like? I mean, I know we start super high level when we work with you guys, but what's that look like from a customer perspective?
Yeah, so I'll start, and Julie, if you want to add details. So with our most current runner, because like you said, we've been down this road, and while we may not be perfect, we have definitely come a long way, I would think. And that was kind of our approach with this last one, because again, we had some of that mindset of, well, I'm not technical, or we had those that they are technical and don't understand the business. So you have that mix, right? But to get everybody to just, okay, let's not worry about filling in this mapping document or whatever, you know, and let's just talk. Let's just talk about your process. Let's learn. And then in the, you know, back in the background, you're filling in the mapping document, you know, for them kind of a thing, because we're getting the answers. But, you know, having the right people kind of upfront to have those discussions and talk through processes. And we found a few areas where it's like, yeah, we manually do that. Why do we do that? Well, we just have, right? Or it's been a limitation, or it was, you know, for this reason or that, whatever the case may be. But, you know, just kind of like, all right, let's table that and let's come back and see if maybe there isn't a better option for that too. But it is definitely a process of just kind of, and you just got to start, because that's the other thing. And I think somebody mentioned it earlier, and I forget who, but it's just, you know, overwhelming of, you've got all of this, you know, how do you focus and figure out what it is that you're looking for? And it does take a few iterations, and it does, you know, take some upfront work, but the final product, when you get to the end of it, is much better.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. But go ahead.
Jeff, through this conversation, or sorry, go ahead, Lori.
Go ahead, Julie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just going to add to that. You can't think of everything right out of the gate. And because it's hard to pull those details out of the people that know the process. So that's why the iterative approach of testing and going back and forth, and why that's so important, and why I don't know how you would ever do that if you weren't working with somebody from a customer perspective that had that inside knowledge. I think it'd be incredibly difficult for a software provider to try to figure out all of those intricacies. So, I mean, that's the part that, you know, it is more work up front, but hopefully you can get dialed into those details and you have that more valuable product at the end.
Would you say it takes a dedicated person?
What's that?
Would you say it takes a full-time dedicated person to do it?
Yeah, I think we have a whole team of people that spend, I mean, that's not all we spend time on, but it's a very crucial component. I mean, it probably took us a year to get the Concur integration working seamlessly. And that's a canned connector that you guys offer. In some cases, you know, if our process was unique and it was a lot more complicated, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of back and forth, and you definitely need people on your team that can, from a technical perspective, that can work with the provider.
Absolutely.
So Jeff, I'd love to hear your feedback now, you know, with your experience that you had talked about earlier. I mean, what's your outlook with where you guys are at? And I mean, I'm not sure if you were aware of kind of that there was iPaaS out there, and is that something that you guys did consider? But, you know, hearing some of the thoughts and you know, questions that were brought up today, is it something that you're still optimistic about in your organization, or?
Oh, I think, yeah, I'm definitely optimistic. I mean, I'm not trying to at all, you know, by what I said, like say that this is not valuable. I think it is completely valuable, and it's completely worthwhile. I mean, I wouldn't have dedicated my time to make it work if I didn't think it would, and I didn't think there wasn't a payoff at the end, you know, for the contractor. I mean, I think sometimes it's hard to, when it comes, you have to look at the specific integration. I mean, I guess we're a subcontractor, so we you know, the integrations really pay off when it hits the guys in the field, when it hits the individual worker. You know, when you're talking about information in the office, it's sometimes hard to justify the amount of time to put in that integration. But when you're talking about saving field hours and the guy on the job site, and if he touches that every day, and that's 500 field guys, that can have a huge impact on on an organization. Or, you know, I mean, you know, with Benny and stuff like that. I mean, the big thing for us is prefabrication, you know, and communication between our BDC and our prefab and the integrations and stuff there. You know, when you start integrating with all the tooling, you start driving a manufacturing process. I mean, it's way worth it to do it. But like I said, if it's not tested thoroughly, and what we find is that because the individual providers don't have the data on the opposite side to really thoroughly do the testing. Really, the contractor is the only one who really has that data to really do that thorough testing, because because they just don't have the test bed to test it enough, you know? And so I just think that I've seen a couple of developments in the industry recently that I'm seeing is I'm starting to see more strategic partnerships between software providers instead of just putting out these open APIs and stuff like that. And they do put out open APIs, don't get me wrong, but I am seeing more alignment in the industry of like, okay, I'm not going to own the whole thing, and maybe the API thing isn't working as good, but I'm going to start aligning with these other software providers that are in this space, you know, to perform to have a strategic partnership where we're working together and collaborating to build those integrations between us in that partnership. And then the contractor almost sees that partnership of, you know, if I'm going to sign on with this guy, maybe I'm going to sign on with this other company too, because they've kind of aligned themselves in the industry that way. I'm starting to see that happen a lot more in the industry as time goes on when we start talking about integration.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, you're hitting on a key component of integration. There's really, I always think of it as three parts. You have, and we'll say these are modern systems with APIs. You have the APIs on one side, you have the APIs on the other side. Those alone are not integration. You've got to have a third piece which ties those together, because and it's in that middle piece that there is going to be business logic. There's going to be logic in there. And if you don't understand kind of both sides of those APIs, there's going to be problems. And that is one of the reasons why I think you are seeing partnerships, because, you know, I've had cases where, you know, a company says, well, we're going to integrate with, you know, this ERP system, and they don't know anything about it. Well, good luck. Good luck. And so when you are talking to integrators, make sure that they do understand that they are connecting two pieces of software, and they have to have an understanding to some degree of both sides to a degree. And it takes that third integration piece.
100%. Yeah, 100% agree with you. And that's why we bring on at Ryvit, we have a value add to our clients, because we do bring on betas like the Wanzek team for, you know, the Concur integration and the innate integration and several others. But we need to understand, we understand their product, we understand construction project management, we understand the ERP solution we're connecting to as an expert in that solution, because we're partnered with those guys. But in the middle, we need to understand their business processes and how they're going to use that solution, right? And what their customization inside that solution might look like. Every person, I think every single one of our clients, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, has some type of customization within either their ERP solution or the project management solution that they're using. There are, you know, configurations and changes that we have to add on the fly for every single customer. And having a beta like a Wanzek team come in and say, that's not going to work. You guys, we need to do this first, because they've told us that a lot. That's not going to work, you guys. You need to switch gears and you need to do this instead, is extremely powerful when you build an integration and then you launch it to, Chris can tell you, we build an integration to about 80%. So we say 80% of the customers that come to us can use this out of the box. To Julie's mention earlier about Concur, 20% of those folks need additional configuration and customization within that integration. It's just the industry we live in. There's going to be changes, and we need, as integration platform providers, to be able to make those changes on the fly for our customers. And therefore, we need those partnerships on both sides. So absolutely agree with you, Dennis.
Awesome. And so as we wrap things up, guys, we have about 2 minutes left. I want to first of all thank everyone for coming in today. You know, as we do future roundtables, we're going to continue to dive deeper into some of the specifics, you know, focusing on internal organization structures versus external and some of the value that can be brought there. I wanted to round things out. I mean, I don't necessarily know if we have enough time to really address, you know, complicated versus complex systems. So maybe we'll leave that for another time, unless you do want to hit on that right now, Tammy. Thoughts there?
That's a pretty long, deep process. Let's save that one for.
That's what I figured.
Let's save that one for another one. That could be a whole roundtable in itself.
Exactly, which I figured that's probably the best that we left it there. But I think one of the things that we wanted to leave everyone with is understanding, and I think Julie had made a great point in terms of you got to start somewhere, right? Whether it's at a project level, whether it's at a company level, whether it's internal in your organization or across multiple organizations, it is something that really just needs to be, that first step needs to be taken for you to really accomplish anything. There's multiple levels of testing that's required, validation, and bringing in all points of view, because if you don't address every use case, you're just gonna have to go back to the table. And so there's a lot of great, I think Dennis, Chris, Tammy, all brought up great questions that you need to be asking as you're beginning that process. And I know there's a lot of resources online to be able to start that conversation. And of course, the CPC and the concept of the common data environment really plays into making this a much easier process for everybody there. And so as we close things out, we have, exactly a 60-second timer, I think I can see now. So anybody else want to leave any closing remarks or questions, thoughts, feedbacks, ideas for the next session? We are open to
I don't have any closing remarks, Satyam, but I definitely want to put one more question out there for everyone. Liability related concerns when it comes from third parties. Have you guys heard anything of that sort from, with the relationships to the data that you're leveraging? Because you have so much data environments that you're dealing with, and what the architect or the engineers deal with in terms of data, how those are managed by them versus what data belongs to the general contractor. Has there any conversation that has happened in that capacity with regards to liability?
So we have 10 seconds. I'll make it really fast. Ryvit does see this a lot, sitting in the middle between different partners for the customer. And yes, it's a topic, and the iPaaS platform actually helps a lot because every partner only gets the data they need.
Last but not least, technology stack, third-party connectors. This is probably the bane of my existence that causes me to need mindfulness because of my siloed data, because of all these open APIs, is third-party connectors.
Dan, you're getting it.
So Tammy, take it away. I know Satyam had to hop off, so without further ado, Tammy.
Yeah, and of course it's my first time doing this, so I didn't provide any notes, but I've jotted down a few, and we had a really great conversation. We talked a lot about what is an iPaaS, what is an integrated platform do for me, what it can provide, what does it do versus what does it not do. We talked a lot about how a Ryvit, a construction industry specific integration platform, is different from a Zapier, a Jitterbit, a MuleSoft. In the world of what's working, we had a lot of feedback on, when you get a true integrated solution, when you have someone who understands both systems, when you have a partnership in the middle, so somebody who understands maybe the ERP solution, somebody who understands the other application, and you have somebody in the middle who can kind of translate, you get to choose a best of breed that works for your business process. You get to eliminate manual entry. You get to give time back. In my world, that used to be you get to let a superintendent build and not have to worry about worrying about his expense report. You get to allow employees to stay in a solution that they're comfortable with. We talked a lot about construction data exchange, really organization, pulling apart the organization and integrations between two different organizations, and how that tech stack is very different from integrations within an organization. For an example, external organizations, the engineer versus the GC. Two different organizations need to integrate product information and bring that into one so that they're not wasting their time going back and forth. Everybody's on the same page as to whose responsibility is whose. What's not working? We heard a lot from customers that they get tired of hearing software applications say, sure, we've got open APIs, no problem. Here it is, go build it. An API in itself, and we talked a lot about this, an API in itself is the tool that solves the data flow. It allows for the automation. It allows for live automation if you want to go that far. What it doesn't allow for is the actual connect to the middle part, right? And the understanding of the solutions. And if I have Tammy Alexander, it's two names, Tammy Alexander, in one system, the other application wants it as name. There's got to be somebody in the middle who connects the dots between first name and last name equals name in this solution. there's a lot of people in the world who just say, yeah, we've got an API, let's just throw it out there. Let's provide the API. What does that look like? We did discuss early on in our conversation the import-export versus an actual API connector, and the power of the live data in our industry, the ability to have and forecast based on data that's flowing every 5 minutes, every 30 seconds, versus relying on a person to grab a file, manipulate that file, import that file, take that file from somebody else, email it to somebody else, change the file again, put it in this system. We talked a lot about that, and a lot about how that used to be what we termed as fine. That was fine. That was okay. Now it's not okay. Now we need our margins are so minimal. We're reliant on the absolute most up-to-date data that we can get. Data is powerful. The data silos, like Dan said, are a nightmare. But the ability to choose best of breed relies on an integration partner, an integration platform that really can connect all of the dots. So there was a lot about a product and understanding how data can be tested between two systems as it's integrated, and a lot about whose responsibility is that? Is there the responsibility of the product that you're buying, the software application, that solution, to say, here they are, they're handing you these APIs, but what if they don't work? What if the endpoints they've developed don't actually fit into the solution, the other solution that you're trying to move data to? Validation, security. It was a long conversation. We didn't even get to some pieces and parts of it. It was a great conversation. Really enjoyed having the customer approach, the software approach, as well as feedback from the whole group.